On some brief comments from Brandon Kernen, who, as Commissioner Scott noted, has assumed to be the administrator of the Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau. I'll briefly introduce Brandon as the administrator working at of the Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau at DES. He's been involved at DES for 25 years of professional experience with a graduate degree in civil and environmental engineering from Tufts University, and has an undergraduate degree in hydrology and water resources from the University of Arizona. He's also a licensed professional geologist. And today, Brandon's going to talk about current updates in legislation and policy in New Hampshire, as well as touching on some of the things we're doing with climate in our bureau. Brandon, I think we're switching you over, and you should be able to see your presentation.
Thank you. Do you see the slides, Pierce?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending. I just want to first start off by thanking everyone in attendance for all your work in protecting our drinking water quality. It's really a broad group of people. It includes all water system staff, be it operators, managers, customer service. It includes planners, consultants, land conservation experts, engineers, attorneys, our laboratories that do our analysis, financial managers, and then our colleagues all across DES. Every program at DES somehow complements the protection of drinking water quality. I also want to note that this includes our elected officials, both at the local level, state level, and federal level. And then lastly, our partner organizations that just do amazing work in collaborating with us, including Granite State Rural Water, New Hampshire Water Works Association, RCAP, New Hampshire Municipal Association, and others. You know, it's a real interesting time in drinking water. In my 2 decades at the agency, I've never seen a time where both political parties are really focused in a positive way on drinking water issues. And so we're really in a unique position to continue our work and even enhance our efforts to protect our drinking water. You know, all of our work is directly protecting the public health and the environment. It takes everybody I just listed working together to do so. And along the way, while we often have small differences of opinion, as Boyd Smith in New Hampshire Water Works points out, is we're ultimately all moving in the same direction and cooperating. And so it's really fulfilling to be in this role. One thing I've really come to even appreciate more in this new role over the last year is just what a group of problem solvers you are. Day in and day out, there are surprises and potentially significant problems that could affect water systems. And you know, when working with water systems or others that I listed above, I'm just always amazed how we have the meetings and follow-up work, and that solutions are developed, and that people put in the extra work, they get the public support, they get the resources needed to you know, face public health threats and to make sure they're addressed. You know, our work isn't often recognized by the general public, but you know, I think we all do know what our work means, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it. So now I'm going to go on to some policy updates, just to update you on some things that are going on in the state, and I'd be happy to follow up with anyone and discussions in the future on these topics if you want more information. First of all, I want to go over what's happening at the legislature. Although the legislature is largely remote at this point, there's a fair amount of activity that affects drinking water. One of the first bills I'll talk about is House Bill 235, which has passed the House and is now pending in the Senate. And there's 2 different things happening with this bill that are somewhat unrelated. One, it's tweaking the department's authority when we are evaluating new sources of water for small community water systems, so wells that produce less than 57,600 gallons a day, to ensure that nearby private wells aren't being impacted. It's something we haven't seen a lot of, but it clarifies we have that authority as more development continues in New Hampshire, especially southern New Hampshire. And then unrelated, but very important as well, that bill is going to expand the eligibility of the PFAS Remediation Loan Fund that Commissioner Scott mentioned, the $50 million fund to address PFAS contamination, to allow communities to apply for it, opposed to just water systems. And that's pretty important because in New Hampshire, we have areas where there's dozens to hundreds of private wells that are contaminated with PFAS without an obvious or a cooperating responsible party. And so this would enable communities to apply for loans to look at remedies, be it treatment or water system extensions to those entities. Another bill is Senate Bill 87. It's passed the Senate and it's now pending in the House. And this bill is really about promoting regionalization of water supply, either to provide a long-term supply of water or emergency backup. And what it would do, Senate Bill 87, is allow a system that's sort of in the middle of two systems that want to share water, and that middle system is needed to transport the water, so to wheel it from one to another, but they actually don't need the water, is to charge a wheeling fee, which they can do right now, but to be able to divert some of that revenue to other municipal initiatives, be it addressing a brownfield project or wastewater or purchasing a property or something like that. And while at first that might raise some concern that some revenue associated with water is going towards other issues, I think the way you can look at it is it's an incentive for a community to participate in a regionalization project. And already these communities have revenue from their customers themselves, and so this is additional wheeling revenue. And so I think it's a good thing. A really positive thing that's happened in New Hampshire over the last 20 years is we've gone from towns not wanting to talk about managing water on a regional basis to water systems and elected officials at the local and state level being very comfortable talking about regional projects. And that's ultimately going to be important as we want to address challenges such as climate change or just improve the availability of safe drinking water throughout the state. Another piece of legislation that's pending is House Bill 135, and this bill has passed the House and is now in the Senate. And it establishes a requirement for responsible parties to pay for treatment or connection of homes with contaminated wells. Already, if there's a responsible party and they impact private wells, they need to address those concerns and address if you're connecting a home on a private well to a water system to pay all the costs to connect, but not pay the bill on an ongoing basis. And so this legislation would require that the responsible party pay the water bill for a period of time to help with the transition from someone who's on a private well to being connected to the water system that now will have quarterly or monthly bills. Another bill is House Bill 236. This one's passed the House and is now in the Senate. And it's just establishing a statute of limitations associated with civil actions associated with PFAS contamination. Another bill, House Bill 271, is mostly a housekeeping bill. It's just cleaning up some terminology in statute about PFAS. When PFAS was first addressed in state law, there was a lot of uncertainty about PFAS at that point. And so at the time, the elected officials wanted to reference things in EPA's statutes, and so they referenced PFAS associated with a lab method 537. And this would clarify that PFAS is a broader group of compounds and address the polyfluoroalkyl substances in addition to the perfluoroalkyl substances. Another bill that was considered this session is House Bill 611. This is something it addressed fluoridation of public water systems. It would have abolished it, made it so that no water system could add fluoride. Right now, communities can vote to add it to their water, and so this would take that ability away. That bill has been retained, so it may be worked on later by the legislature, or it may just go away. But the pros of the bill are that people are against adding fluoride for everyone. They feel like it's mass medication. The cons of not allowing water system fluoridate is that even if the public votes for it, they wouldn't be allowed to do it. And there's been a lot of public health studies that show that there's a lot of real benefits with fluoridation and oral health, which ultimately leads to overall health protection. Another bill, House Bill 335, would require that bottled water sold in New Hampshire monitor and comply with New Hampshire Public Water Systems MCLs. And New Hampshire has MCLs that go beyond EPA's MCLs, which FDA references for bottled water. And so we have a lower standard for arsenic and MTB, or we have a standard for MTB where there's none at the federal level. And then of course our PFAS MCLs. I just want to talk a little bit about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. Commissioner Scott made mention of this. New Hampshire is expected to get over $1 billion from the federal government. We're fortunate in our state in that our state budget has not suffered substantially or really at all during COVID. And so unlike other states, we have opportunities in New Hampshire to put this money towards infrastructure and education and other important uses, including things like COVID. We are expecting to have a lot of money put towards drinking water infrastructure, and then also wastewater, stormwater, and potentially dams. A lot of details are going to come out any day on exactly how much funding is available for various issues. But we do know some things at this point based on some regulations issued by the Federal Treasury Department. One is that the funds will have to be obligated by the end of 2024 and then spent by the end of 2026. So, one thing we're really encouraging people right now is to, think about the potential of grant dollars when you apply for your drinking water SRF or clean water SRF loans. And I just note that the pre-applications are due June 1st. We do think there's a potential that some of these ARPA funds will be coupled with loan funds. These pre-applications are not substantial, so it's, even though time's short and June 1's right around the corner, you can still articulate projects and general estimate of costs for them to get on the list. So we really encourage you to do that. We do expect if we receive these ARPA funds that it'll be utilized with the SRF over the next 2-3 years. So this won't be the only round, but I think it would benefit a water system to get on the list. And you can always decide later not to proceed. Once we have the funds and the details, we're going to have extensive outreach. We'll be doing emails to our contact list, potentially webinars, and trying to be proactive. We've already worked to establish positions to help administer the funds. In drinking water, we administer about $20 million a year in SRF loans, and so an infusion of $50, $100, $150 million in a few-year period increases the workload quite a bit, both from engineering reviews and processing the applications and transferring funds into and out of the state. And so we haven't filled these positions yet, but they've been established, which is a process in state government. There are some concerns that we have. We're hearing that although there's no doubt probably $1 billion worth of infrastructure improvements needed for drinking water in New Hampshire, that the capacity of the supply lines, like things like pipe or even construction contractors, is being pushed right now. And so we are concerned that we'll have this infusion of money for a lot of needs that we know are out there, but we're concerned about what it may do to prices and if we'll really be able to get a lot more work done in a short period of time. And so we'll definitely want to hear back from the community, and we'll provide feedback to our elected officials if we see there is a problem with that. And as Commissioner Scott noted, there's other sources of funding available, anything from our SRF now to what may be increased substantially in the future. The federal government's looking at expanding funding for PFAS challenges and maybe even for private wells for the first time. I just want to touch upon some new water quality standards. At this point, I think most people are aware of our PFAS MCLs. The litigation's over. Water systems are completing their 4 quarters of compliance monitoring. We're seeing about 7% of the 1,600 sources that need the sample are exceeding an MCL. As Commissioner Scott noted, we have the PFAS Remediation Loan Fund to help comply with this MCL. Not only is it a very low interest loan, there's loan forgiveness now, and then potentially a lot more in the future pending the outcome of litigation. We've also established, with the help of the trust fund, water treatment design grants for schools and daycares. And so the design costs for a PFAS treatment system can be paid for by grants. And something else that I'm really excited about is the trust fund has funded a water system consolidation grant program. And that's really can address any contaminants. We have a number of small water systems that are now in close proximity to larger water systems as those systems expanded over time. And with things like a lower arsenic MCL, new PFAS MCLs, when you look at the long-term costs, it's often more advantageous to consolidate for the smaller water system with the larger water system. So these grants will at least do that assessment on what it would cost to expand versus potentially put in treatment, both the initial and long-term costs. And we think this could really benefit a number of systems in New Hampshire. So our arsenic MCL, I think most people know, has been lowered from 10 to 5 parts per billion, and that will be enforced July 1st as of this year. And many of you may have participated in a webinar earlier this year, and it's recorded if anyone wants additional information. But we are changing our drinking water regulations to establish an enforceable level for manganese of 0.3 milligrams per liter, consistent with a federal health advisory that's pretty strongly worded about the health concerns associated with manganese. And then we also plan to include a notification level of 0.1 milligrams per liter. It's consistent with sort of the consensus of the science lately on manganese from a number of health agencies, including New Jersey, our environmental health department, and health agencies in Canada. And EPA is even reevaluating their somewhat dated health advisory at this point for manganese. Lead and copper rule is sort of looming out there. This is a federal requirement. It's the impact on water systems, and the drinking water program for New Hampshire is going to be substantial. We're trying to really get a hold on what we need to do to manage this rule, and as well as to get information out to water systems on what they're going to need to do to comply with this. It's a little bit on hold right now. When the president's changed, there was a regulatory freeze pending review put on this rule. It's expected the rule to be tweaked, get more public input, but EPA is committed to moving forward, and there's going to be substantial work required by the water systems for lead service lines, public notification based on homeowner results, and then averages. There's like 2 levels of notification. It's just going to be a lot of new work and tracking by DES and in the field efforts by water systems to comply with this rule. DES is heavily engaged, trying to work with developing the final version of this rule. We're working with other states and providing comments to EPA on all those topics we've listed below. I'll just note the last bullet on lead testing in schools and child care facilities. That's something New Hampshire is ahead of the federal government on. Because of a bill that was passed a couple years ago, Senate Bill 287, and we just want to make sure that the federal rule considers work that we're already doing in New Hampshire, so that additional requirements that are somewhat redundant aren't put on schools and child care facilities where a lot of work is ongoing already. I just want to acknowledge some source water protection acknowledgements, some new initiatives, and so this goes a little beyond what Pierce mentioned earlier. First of all, our Bureau is recommitting itself to integrating climate change considerations in our work. We're ahead of most other state drinking water programs because of efforts that we've implemented over the last 10 years, anything from emergency power generators to vulnerability assessments when we're issuing new approvals or permits. But the Bureau is now looking again at what our path forward should be on making sure we're addressing climate change in our daily work, and how we can assist water systems and consider that. And I'd say we're probably about 2/3 the way through that internal effort, but we'll have information to share with the public in the next 6 months, most likely. We also are implementing a new statute that's addressing PFAS. The statute bans fire training using fluorinated firefighting foams and prohibits the use of fluorinated firefighting foams except where required by federal law. Things at certain airports and stuff like that. There's also a component that requires that we work with fire departments to get sort of the legacy PFAS Class B foams out of their departments that would have the PFAS and PFOA and other regulated PFAS compounds in it. We're working with the Seacoast Commission. It's a 10-year commission that meets monthly to address Seacoast drinking water issues. Right now, we're sort of going through all the towns on the commission, but in that process, our staff at DES have sort of automated the development of source water protection maps and water use information and water well maps for communities. And so we can systematically produce maps that show sensitive water resource areas for drinking water, that show water use information for the towns, show the mapping of wetlands and prime wetlands, And it's just developed a good resource that I think a number of communities will find useful even outside this commission and outside the Seacoast area. And we continue to advance our work in addressing cyanobacteria. Manchester Waterworks is working with DES using a water quality probe to scan for that. And we have a program that is available to provide grants, training, and resources to help surface water systems monitor cyanobacteria, something I think we're going to continue to hear a lot more about in New Hampshire in the years to come. And then another initiative I just want to talk about is efforts to really address private wells, especially in known hotspot areas of natural contaminants. We've never really had a program to do this before, and we don't, in our bureau, we have 50 people and only one person's funded to work with private wells, and that's for the Water Well Board. But staff in the bureau are taking this on project by project as a special project and championing it to find places like in southern Hooksett where there's high uranium, or Auburn that might be a uranium and arsenic problem, and working at the trust fund to provide testing to homeowners, and then working with our staff in the environmental health program to assess the data and provide community outreach on what those private well owners can do. We do hope we'll have a new position established to help with this initiative in the next budget. There is a position that's still being carried forward in the budgets that are being considered by the governor and legislature at this time. I just want to mention a number of important deadlines for various grants that we have. I won't read through all this. This can be a resource, but we do provide a lot of financial assistance to water systems, and we encourage you to take advantage of these grant programs and to contact us if you want more information about the applicability, eligibility, and timing, or your specific water system needs. And lastly, I just want to talk about retirements since we last met in 2019. Commissioner Scott did a great job talking about Sarah and Tom, and I could spend my whole time talking about either one of them or any of these people on here. But we have had a number of retirements. Terry Savia, who helped with data management, Chip Mackey, who led the chemical monitoring program, Mitch Locker, who for a few decades managed the groundwater discharge program, and then Rick Skrinka, who will be retiring at the end of June. So you still have a chance to give your remarks to Rick, or preferably, from my standpoint, harass him a little bit before he leaves. He's up for it. So, these are big holes to fill, but they also produced a lot of opportunities for other staff. There's been a lot of rotations in the Bureau because of internal vacancies over the last year. And, now, as Commissioner Scott mentioned, there's a number of jobs available at DES. And in the Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau, there's actually 2 external postings, something that's pretty uncommon. One is for the Water Well program. That position posting, the deadline to apply is in 2 days. So that would be managing the program that licenses well drillers, pump installers, and oversees well construction standards and provides a ton of assistance to homeowners. It's a great job. Formerly held by Rick Schofield and Abby Fopiano, and so I encourage people to apply if they're interested. The other external position is for the large groundwater withdrawal position that also does community well siting. It's actually a position I started with the agency back in January 2000. And again, the deadline for that is in 2 days. So again, please look at it. If you need to see the postings, just contact us. We can email them to you. They are on the state, not DES's, but the state website. A little hard to find there, but we can email you the posting today if you send us a message. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. We have a couple questions, which Liz Polanzi, if you can hang with us, Brandon. We just have a couple questions that Liz will state to you. We're about at time. We're a couple minutes over, but we should be able to fit in at least 2 questions. So Liz, can you let Brandon know what the questions are?
Sure. The first one, Brandon, is can funding be used for an existing water system to have 4 filtration tanks serviced? Cost would be approximately $26,000.
The type of projects that we expect to be eligible under ARPA use a similar eligibility criteria as the drinking water SRF. So if it's simple operation and maintenance costs, that's unlikely to be funded. But if it's upgrading or modernizing a project or redoing a treatment system, that might be possible. But I would encourage you to contact Rick Skarinka or Randy Swaza or Cindy Clevens as we get more information available to talk about the specifics of your project and the eligibility.
Okay, and the next one says, please clarify, the new manganese rule and notification letter are proposed, but are not yet approved. Is that correct?
Not entirely. Back in December, the ambient groundwater quality standard, which is the cleanup standard for waste sites for manganese, was changed from 0.84 to 0.3. And really, DES had no choice. There's a state law that says we must adopt an ambient groundwater quality standard that is consistent with federal health advisories. And there's a federal health advisory for manganese. So it's a whole standalone document. You can find it pretty easily by just typing in those words, health advisory manganese. So already we could enforce the 0.3 milligram per liter standard for manganese. But what we're doing is, because it's a pretty significant effort for drinking water systems to comply with it, we are revising our drinking water rules to tailor them for manganese instead of charging ahead right now. So we're anticipating a July 1st, 2022 deadline for enforcing the 0.3. The 0.1 notification level is something that can be discussed, but the science is strong, and our agency is going to recommend that notification level. It's an acute health concern to infants, and we really see no choice. But to not have a 0.3 standard would require a change to state law.